Melissa Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining me on this series. I know it's a crazy hectic time, and for you to take out some space in your mind and your schedule to join us, we really appreciate it, especially on a Sunday.
I mean, the days just blend together, so I don't know what day it is. I know it's another gloomy day. It might have been tougher if it was sunny out because we have to take those when we get them. But yeah, happy to connect.
Good point. So why don't we start with this? Why don't we briefly, kind of, if you don't mind, just introducing yourself and explaining through what it is you do professionally and how you connect to the ecosystem of retail.
Sure. So my name is Melissa Gonzalez. I am the CEO and founder of the Lioness Group and also a principal and shareholder in MG2. So the Lioness Group is an MG2 company. We are experiential retail strategists and pop-up architects, and MG2 is a global architecture firm. So we really are in a unique position where we kind of can work with the brand full circle from the earliest conversations of I think I want to be in physical retail to ideating around what that would be, designing and all the architectural services and build out management. So it allows us to get really in the trenches with our clients. It's an interesting time right now for us, obviously, in that we specialize in physical retail. It's been already a kind of an evolving area. And now we're just trying to step up to the challenge of how do we rethink it. And I think we're in such early stages of that, early innings of it. So we don't really have all the answers yet, but we are keeping busy, just staying connected. I think dialogue and communication is more important than ever. I think it's great you're doing what you're doing for that. And you know, as things slowly start to open and we can study how consumers are reacting and what's working, what's not, we're just going to be on our toes trying to evolve with it.
Yeah. And where are you riding this whole isolation or quarantine out?
Yeah, so we are in Hoboken, so right across the water. Our offices are in Chelsea, so we live close to that. And yeah, just staying really busy in our apartment right now. It's real.
I can see that on the expression for sure. I think it's real it got real quick overnight, in fact, for everybody. So how has the business changed? Of course, famously so, retail is one of the most immediately impacted industries across the board, especially when you talk about physical retail. So how has your business kind of taken shape over the last 6 weeks, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have our strategy hats on more than anything. I mean, that always kind of how we kick off a project with the client, but it's how we're thinking across the board. We do have a couple clients that are active, which is great, just ongoing clients. But what we're doing is really just thinking through like, we are going to shop in stores again. I think if anything, this is, you know, creating more and more pent up demand, and an interesting shift is happening where you're seeing an accelerated adoption of technology. So it's going to reshape the in-store experience. And you were starting to see that happen a bit, and people dip their toes in BOPIS and, you know, order ahead and curbside pickup and all of that. And now it's going to need to be more holistically integrated into the in-store experience because we're all having to adopt it right now. So we're probably not going to go backwards. And so there's this interesting mix happening right now of like the short-term kind of band-aids, and those things will probably shift out as we get back to the new norm, whenever that is. And other things aren't, and we're going to have been reconditioned, and it's going to impact the future of the store. So I think it's a little bit of learning stages for that, and thinking through kind of what falls in which. And you know, what we have to be careful of is with retail, it doesn't become so clinical because we're trying to be so safe that we forget about the human layer of it. Retail is an emotional experience, shopping's emotional, and so how do we layer back in the human side of it, and how do we think about the hospitality side of it, and but it still feels right? We can't be tone deaf, but it can't feel scary either, or else, you know, you just stay at home and shop online. But I think people are getting fatigued of that, like we're all itching. So it's just kind of like what's gonna need to be reshaped, and everything from signage to the parking lots to thinking through how you design a checkout counter, you know, how do you, to account for not only social distance, but also the fact that we're going to be contactless payments more than not. How do we rethink the gondola at the beauty store, and testers feeling safe? Like there's so many things we need to think about.
I mean, you mentioned that you still have a couple active clients. I'm assuming those are essential business. Those are physical retailers that are still open.
Sure. So between the Line S Group and MG2, some of our biggest clients are Costco and Amazon, and those are retailers that are doing very well right now. So they're kind of at the front lines in many ways, and we intersect with those clients in a number of ways. So so it's interesting having them be active, because there's active dialogue happening, and I think a lot of people have eyes on those retailers right now too, because they're learning on the fly, and so people are figuring out what to learn from that.
Is it
So it's definitely interesting.
is the environment like rapid ideation and deployment and like fail fast type of stuff, or and just hey, we're thinking about this for the parking lot pickup or curbside, like let's give it a shot? Like, are you finding quick green lights right now?
I mean, so I can't say that I'm actively involved in those deployments, but I am seeing active decisions happening for sure. And the tricky part is when they're national, they can't necessarily all make the same uniform decision across all of those locations, because they now have to deal with counties having different rules, states having different rules, different governors setting different precedents. Some are stricter than others. Some come down harder on you can't sell anything that's not essential. Others will be like, we need everything to be open, right? So it's a interesting time. They definitely have to think fast, put stuff up that are more tactical.
Mhm.
And there's not as much room to take the time to think through, is all of these things on brand from like a stylistic standpoint, and just like, are we putting our customers first with safety is kind of the guiding light right now. So it's early still, but eventually that's going to need to shift, and we're going to need to layer brand and voice and things like that on top of it, and depending on the categories.
I guess is your team internally ideating on anything new or working on any new kind of deployments that are inspired by the current environment?
Yeah, there's certain things that are happening. Can't name who, but there's definitely projects where we have to account for social distancing. So break rooms might need to double in size, for example, because people can't sit right next to each other, right? So how do we account for that? Or there's definitely wayfinding signage that's needing to be more informing to consumers. Or we haven't deployed any, but we're talking a lot with clients on how do we rethink the storefront windows. There's an interesting kind of mix happening. If you think about the metrics that people are thinking about are, in the past, it's like experience per square foot was right. Like a few months ago, that became the thing everybody started thinking about. What is the experience per square foot? And now it's kind of like, people are thinking more like the drive-through. And so how do we think about kind of throughput, and how do we think about like turnover and how fast that needs to happen? And it's more like the quick serve restaurant mentality a little bit. But so how do we marry that with the human side of things as well, is kind of like the big conversations that we're having. And it goes across categories. We're thinking about play, we're thinking about Toys R Us didn't work, and then you saw camp and all those guys kind of launched, and they leaned into play for kids. What is play going to look like?
Yeah.
When doors open, and how does that feel safe? What does a beauty store look like? And how do we think about testers? And how do we think about the tactile aspects of it? And how do we have augmented reality that already existed feel unique? How do we, how do we rethink the storefronts if everybody's leaning into curbside and BOPIS? And do we have to rethink about entrances and exits? And so there's a lot. And I think a lot of it's nobody's going to dive in right away to making big investments to fix all of it at the beginning. I think people are going to do little mini tests, and they're going to kind of makeshift it, right? They might just throw a table up and be like, does this work? If I put this table out front or by the door, will people come? And then if they do, okay, what about that worked and didn't work? And how do I, and then they start to add in like, okay, now how do I add a human layer to that, right? How do I make it feel a little bit more personable? But before they make a lot of those big decisions, I think it's just a lot of like just quick and dirty kind of band-aids and tests and figuring it out.
What are your projections, let's say 5 years out, in terms of what the in-store might look like and feel like, or even if you want to take it to the aspect of just the customer sentiment and comfort level of returning to in-store shopping?
I think we'll get back there. I think it might not be this year, you know, which none of us want to say out loud, but I think when we get a vaccine and, you know, people, that's not going to be 100% either, but it's going to be at a safer point. I think people will go back. That's why it's like a balance out of how much are short-term, just band-aids that we have to do because we have to maintain social distance until there are vaccines or things like that in place, versus how is the consumer being reshaped, and that's going to inform how the store has to change longer term. So I think we're social human beings. I think we're not even 2 months in, and think about talking about Zoom fatigue and just being done with being on a device all the time. And, you know, I think that's why TikTok's probably seeing a heyday too, because like, it's like kind of like a mindless thing. Actually, it takes a lot to create good content, but you know, it's like kind of like that silly thing you can escape to, and it feels social in essence because you're like socially sharing. But I think we miss being out. So I don't think that's going to go away. I think that it's going to raise the bar for the kind of retail experiences that we need to deliver, and that they're going to need to find a marriage of efficiency and experience, right? In that I'm not going to think about this is a physical store, this is my phone, this is my laptop. You're already seeing that merging, but now even more as a consumer, that fluidity of knowing I can order ahead and it's going to be ready for me, and I'm not going to have to wait. And, you know, I can see visibility of what's in your store, or I can return wherever I want to return a product. Like all those things are going to have to be as seamless as possible. So we're going to have to rethink like what the front of house, back of house looks like. How do we make that be efficient? Think of all the grocers that are joining forces with Instacart and things like that, or Shipped, right, with Target. So like if that exists, then, you know, those kind of stores are going to have to rethink efficiencies and how they operationalize better, because none of those things are going to feel like conveniences if I'm waiting like hours for them to happen, right? So there's going to be that side of it, but then it's going to also be the side of I'm actually going to expect something a little bit deeper out of physical then, because otherwise I could just order online because I'm now more comfortable to do that, you know? So storytelling is going to have to be heightened, visual impact, the dimensionality of a store experience, brand ambassadors or store concierge or sales associates, whatever you call them, they're going to have to be even more educated. They're going to have to understand how technology works. They're going to be able to guide the consumer through that experience. They're going to have more information in their head, because any of us are, you know, getting information online even faster. So, and then also just like thinking across generations, I think people put buckets like, oh, if you were Gen Z and millennial, you know, you were tech savvy, and we had to integrate that into our stores. But if I was dealing with an older demographic, like not so much. Well, that's also changing, because everybody, I mean, my mom's in her mid 60s and she shopped Madison Reed for the first time a couple weeks ago because she couldn't deal with her gray hair, and she downloaded their AR app, and she would have never done that otherwise. And she ordered her hair dye and she dyed her hair at home, and it looked pretty good. So now she's a new customer of theirs. And so, right, it's like we're all being reconditioned. So we can't, as consultants or as brand or as retailers, you can't assume that's going to go backwards, because we're all forming new habits and new behaviors, and so they're all going to have to be accounted for.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, 2 years ago, we were still talking, or we were making a shift from the term omni-channel, which is essentially being available on multiple platforms, whether it be browser-based on your phone, your tablets, and your computers, versus in-store and otherwise. And then you started hearing the word unified commerce, right? So what does a unified commerce model look like? And now it's so much easier to visualize and picture what that actually means when I hear you talking about it, because it's true. The interaction between the physical and the digital, it's not separate at all. And it hasn't been in a lot of the, like, I mean, retailers were making a shift, and those that
Right.
were already making the real investments into having that happen are in a good place to really galvanize and solidify their path forward. And the ones that probably were lacking it and kind of keeping it by the wayside are probably kicking themselves in the butt a little bit in terms of having to play a bit of catch up or maybe even risk being obsolete. So um, really interesting insights. Melissa, who are you looking to connect with these days?
I mean, I'm trying to keep kind of like a a holistic lens in who I'm talking to. So definitely talking to a lot of brands and retailers of different sizes, different sectors. Not just assuming the ones that are strong right now, the categories that are strong right now, are the only ones I should talk to. So we're talking to people in apparel, we're talking to people in beauty, we're talking to people in home categories, but also, everything from D2C to mass and mass retailers, people, department stores, but also VCs, kind of thinking through their lens too of what do they see in the future. And I do talk to just, a good amount of other industry consultants too. I think, right now there's a lot of collaborative note sharing, which is good, because none of us have the answer anyway. So just kind of like brainstorming, kicking things around together.
Absolutely. Well, what is the best way to either contact you or follow the work that you're doing?
Sure. So we're on socials. So either Mel's Styles on LinkedIn and Twitter, probably the best places. And then same thing, Lioness Group on Instagram and LinkedIn or Twitter. So yeah, we're pretty responsive. So love to hear from anybody if they had questions, if they wanted to talk over, just riff some ideas and thoughts for the future.
Perfect. Melissa Gonzalez of the Lioness Group, thank you so much for your time. Please enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope nothing but wellness for yourself, your friends, your family, your colleagues, everybody around you.
Same to you guys.
Cool. Cheers.